right, welcome to another episode of Piecing It Together, the podcast where we take a look at a new movie and try to figure out what movies inspired it. And today on the show, this seems to be happening a lot lately. I don't know why that is, but we are talking about a movie that nobody liked, but I liked. So, hey, you know what? I like championing movies that, don't really get a fair shake, and I feel like this is one of them. But me and my guest, Eric Langberg, both had a good time with this movie and liked it for the movie that it is trying to be. And that movie is The Exorcism, which, yes, get it out of your system now, is the second exorcism related movie that Russell Crowe has starred in a year. We talk about it a little later in the conversation, but there are behind the scenes reasons why these movies kind of came out the way they did, so close together. Get over it. Just watch the movie for what it is. But anyway, we'll get into that more later as we get into the conversation. For now, I just want to remind you, as always, to make sure you are subscribed to Piecing It Together wherever you listen to podcasts. You can follow us on social media at Piecing Pod. Join our Facebook group, Popcorn and Puzzle Pieces, where we continue the conversation about all the movies we talk about here on the show. And don't forget to check out our Patreon, the Produced by David Rosen Patreon, where I post bonus and advanced content, as well as video versions of some episodes of Piecing It Together. Check it out, patreon.com/by David Rosen. I appreciate the support, everybody. Let's get into The Exorcism. All right, so I searched the internet for someone who liked this movie as much as I did, and I'm happy I found someone. We're talking about The Exorcism, and joining me is Eric Langberg. How you doing, Eric?
Hello, pretty good. Glad to be back.
Yeah, I am happy to have you back. Always a great time when you come on the show. And yeah, this is a movie that I was looking forward to, but very cautiously, because as we know, Russell Crowe is in this era now of just kind of taking on project after project, and not all of them hit. And certainly this movie has not been a success as far as box office, critically, any of that. And, I think it's a lot better than people are giving it credit for.
I agree. I think there's enough going on here that I found things to be interested in and entertained by, even if, as a whole, it's a little messy, for sure. But
yeah.
In ways that I didn't really mind, ways that made me think. So
yeah, absolutely. I think this movie has a lot more on its mind than being just another exorcism horror movie. And I feel like that has been kind of the bulk of the critique of it. Like, it's not a good enough exorcism horror movie, and it's like, don't we have enough of those?
We have so many of those.
We have so many, and so I appreciate it having something else on its mind. But we'll get into a lot of that, I think, along the way with puzzle pieces. So let's just start getting into it. What do you have for your first puzzle piece?
Well, my first one, I assume, is also your first one. It's the obvious one, The Exorcist.
Sure.
This one is The Exorcism. That's The Exorcist. I think that's intentional. I think that the fact that it's essentially like a mockbuster title, like one of those asylum, like Transmorphers, it's so close that we're supposed to be thinking the whole time about the fact that this isn't The Exorcist, it's The Exorcism.
Yeah.
I was very amused to find out that the movie that he's making in this movie is a remake of The Exorcist, even though they don't explicitly say it. It's they're calling it the Georgetown Project. And his daughter at one point is like, "Oh, so you're remaking? Oh, wow, okay." Like, yeah, clearly The Exorcist. We all know, and they name drop it later, so I don't know why we couldn't just quite say it there. But more than just lip service, there are a lot of little connections that I thought were a lot of fun. The Exorcist, the original, has this thing going on with there's like gender trouble in it. The fact that Ellen Burstyn plays a single mother who's named Chris, I think is interesting. It's sort of a unisex name. Even Reagan, I suppose, now especially calls it to mind a man more than a young girl. And this movie has a bunch of those too. His daughter is named Lee, which could go either way, and then the girl who's starring as the possessed girl, Chloe Bailey's character, is named Blake, which is also a gender non-specific name.
Sure.
Like Chris in The Exorcist, Russell Crowe's character here is an actor. Chris was a movie star in that in the original movie, and There is, I think, a reading of The Exorcist possible where, if she wasn't a single mother who was often out of the home working instead of, caring for her daughter, then maybe her daughter wouldn't have been as open to possession. And so this movie, the fact that he's a movie star, leads him down this path of addiction, unfortunately, and so he doesn't care for his wife, and she dies, and then he's left trying to rebuild his relationship with his daughter. So um, it's sort of a different version of the story of The Exorcist, of a single parent whose movie stardom potentially messes up significant
Yeah.
relationships in his life in a supernatural kind of way.
Yeah, absolutely. And to get to the meta aspect of this, which is going to come up in a bunch of puzzle pieces, also with The Exorcist, and I don't know if The Omen was going to be a puzzle piece for you or not, but like, with both of those movies having such behind the scene drama, and this
Yeah,
movie kind of taking that and running with it. The idea of like, well, maybe there was something actually wrong with the production of The Exorcist, and now that we're coming back in, we're reconnecting with all of that horribleness and that evil that maybe was actually a part of the set. I was also not a puzzle piece, but I was also thinking of this year's Late Night with the Devil, which deals with similar
sure.
ideas of like, what if there's something like actually wrong with this set? And that movie, of course, recalled The Exorcist as well. So you kind of have a lot of kind of in the air right now of like these meta ideas of like, well, what if these classically troubled movies really were, there was something like evil going on at the moment. And yeah, so The Exorcist has to be in this. So I'm glad you brought it up as the first one. My most obvious one, though, even though I guess The Exorcist really is the most obvious, but the one that I was going to say is the most obvious is Wes Craven's New Nightmare,
Ooh,
a movie that takes the idea of Wes Craven making a new Nightmare on Elm Street movie, but it is itself being haunted by Freddy Krueger, and all of the actors in it are being affected by it, and he is popping up and terrorizing everybody and terrorizing the set. And like we're talking about with The Exorcist, this movie within the movie essentially being a remake of The Exorcist and dealing with the same kind of demonic possession that is happening in the movie The Exorcist, but here in the making of this new movie. I'm a sucker for this meta stuff, and I really think
same.
it's handled
Yep.
well here. Even if the movie is messy, like we were saying at the beginning of this conversation, and we will say multiple times throughout, I'm sure. This is a studio interference movie for sure. As a quick aside, I think I read that this was shot before the Pope's Exorcist, which there's our first reference to the Pope's Exorcist here.
Yeah.
But I think this was shot before that, and then probably just on the chopping block for a couple of years or something while that one ended up happening and coming out. But yeah, you just know there was a lot of behind the scenes drama there. But you know, I think that this movie, when it was happening, had a lot on its mind in that meta filmmaking going on. And some of my favorite stuff in this is just kind of the commentary on the Russell Crowe character and the act of
Mhm.
filmmaking, the Adam Goldberg character as well as a kind of megalomaniacal director. And there's a lot there, and I think that's going to also focus in on some of our other puzzle pieces along the way too.
Definitely. Yes. Some things you said there definitely connect into one of my later ones, but first, my next one is related to my first one. I was also thinking about The Exorcist Believer, the more recent
Yeah,
reboot. Um,
yeah,
a couple of things in The Exorcism feel like very kind of self-consciously meta. Like, what would it be like if we tried to remake The Exorcist today? And like you were saying, they shot this a couple of years ago. My understanding is that they started filming before the pandemic hit. Like it's that old,
wow,
and they had to pick
yeah,
back up years later, and then release it years after that. So um, we have, in a sense, tried to remake The Exorcist since then. There's an updated reboot of it, like The Exorcist Believer. This time in The Exorcism, within the world of the film within the film. They make the girl who's possessed black, which feels like an attempt to make the story more progressive.
sure,
And then the other thing that I was thinking about is the fact that his daughter in this movie is a lesbian, is openly in a relationship with well, trying to strike up a relationship with the actress who plays the possessed girl.
Sure.
Um, which I thought connected interestingly to the initial Exorcist, because there's also a reading of that movie that's very conservative, about trying to use the patriarchy of the church to sort of tamp down on a young girl who, if we're looking at, of course, it's demonic activity in the movie, but it's inappropriately timed bodily fluids, and she's masturbating and saying
Yeah.
words she shouldn't say. So this time she's explicitly a lesbian, and when he like creeps down the hallway and sees her kissing Chloe Bailey and sort of sends him over the top into like full on possession at that point. The fact that his daughter, he's got confirmed that she's a lesbian is when the demon really takes hold and he goes after her. So that felt like an interesting twist too on old themes trying to be updated for something new.
Yeah, I like that a lot. And I was also thinking about how like both The Exorcist and The Exorcist Believer like fit in here. And for me, like I was thinking about it, like I like a lot of what you were saying there with like the gender issues that are kind of being brought into trying to bring The Exorcist to, a modern world and trying to like change that up for a current moment.
Right. We have a tendency when we like remake and revisit old stories, we make subtext text nowadays.
Yeah,
So
sure.
this movie
Absolutely.
gets that, I think.
Yeah, and I think this movie gets that, and I think audiences don't know what to do with that. And
Agreed.
like I didn't like The Exorcist Believer like at all,
No,
but
same.
I think it had an uphill battle because I just don't think anybody knows what to do with this kind of stuff anymore. I just don't think it really fits really
Yeah,
well. And
that's the problem with like the first time out of the gate, we did it the best you could do it. And so where does the genre go after that?
yes, exactly. It makes it so damn difficult. But yeah, I think that it's great getting both of those in here. I will go with I'm going to go with a movie that I actually just brought up on this podcast just a few weeks ago for our
Adaptation.
episode on the. Yes, absolutely. No, a new movie I watched for the first time just a month ago. In anticipation for The Fall Guy, I watched The Stunt Man from 1980, which is a great movie about a guy who's like escaped from prison and he's kind of hiding out on this movie set. And Peter O'Toole plays again this megalomaniacal director who he kind of sees this opportunity to take this guy who's on the run and just kind of use him as a stuntman and lead the movie that he's making. And he just doesn't really give a shit about him. It's just, what can I get out of this guy? And really just talks a lot about that relationship in Hollywood and just how used up these actors are. And I think the stuntman fits in really well here, and I think is probably a major, kind of reference point for Adam Goldberg in the way that he approaches this director character, and the way that this movie comments on actors having to just kind of give their all and what it does to them mentally, physically, any of that. Who cares as long as we get the shot and as long as the movie turns out well? I think that is a big part of this movie. And like I was saying, like this movie, it's not really a horror movie. There's scares
No,
in there,
yeah.
the exorcism, but it's not about that. It's really about this actor who has kind of fallen on hard times. In a lot of ways, it's a very big meta commentary on Russell Crowe even taking on these kinds of movies.
For sure.
You look at other actors like that, Nicolas Cage, John Travolta, people who end up in these kind of direct-to-video movies and just trying. He will let these filmmakers walk all over them to get some kind of project that will connect. And I think the Stuntman is a movie that really kind of focuses on that kind of stuff as much as this does.
Yeah, and I think along those lines, it's important that it's Adam Goldberg, right, who was Russell Crowe's co-star in A Beautiful Mind. So the fact that
Sure.
he's now sort of on the other side of it, berating his former co-star for being washed up and old and sweaty and whatever,
Yeah.
feel like there was a meta thing there too. All those close-ups on Russell Crowe, like just sitting there, kind of taking it and internalizing all of the verbal abuse he's getting from Adam Goldberg's character. You have to wonder like what Russell Crowe was thinking about himself in those moments too. Like
Yeah.
his career has gone to some interesting places, because back then, I think he was nominated for Best Actor 3 years in a row, something crazy. Like, and he won
Yeah.
once. So like and now here we are. So, um,
Yes.
what do we do with that?
Yeah,
Um,
and I'm sure that, you get to that low point and, you get this offer for a role that the last person killed themselves because they were probably, possessed by a demon.
right?
You're like, maybe it'll help my career. I'll take it. Screw it.
Yeah, might as well.
Yep. Yeah. What do you got for your next piece?
Sort of along these similar lines, I've got a movie from 1978 called Absolution, which
Okay.
stars Richard Burton, long past his prime, as a priest. Um, and he's the priest at like a Christian boarding school, a Catholic boarding school, and he's being terrorized by two schoolboys who are they're sort of using the confessional to admit to murder. They tell him that they've murdered like a vagrant who's living in the woods behind the school, and because it's done through the confessional, he can't report them, and so it becomes this like
Hmm.
psychological game between the priest and these two boys who may or may not have murdered somebody and may or may not kill again. But when I was thinking about washed up actors having to take whatever role, this movie's Absolution is also not super great, but it's 1978. Looking back on it now, like it looks better than just about anything that gets released these days.
Sure. Sure.
There's a good release. I think Kino released it. I have it on Blu-ray. It looks fantastic, and Richard Burton, always compelling, even in those later years where he was not, not doing Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf anymore. He's taking
Sure.
these like psychological thrillers just made on the cheap, that kind of thing. I highly recommend that movie. It's an interesting one.
Yeah, it sounds really good. I've never seen it, but it definitely sounds great. And yeah, I like the setup of that. That
Hmm.
this person kind of can't really be fully accused because of the way that everything was brought in. That's a great
Right.
setup,
So
and
it
I
plays
definitely would love
sort
to
of like
check
The
that out.
Exorcism, I guess. Plays with your sense of what's real and what's just sort of in his mind. Is he
Yeah.
is he going crazy because of what they did to him, or are they really two evil little boys?
Absolutely, and he needs this role, or else, he's just basically has nothing. So he's kind of got to
Yep.
just keep going, even as everything just keeps hitting the wall. But I will go next. I haven't seen this movie since it came out, so I don't really remember all the ins and outs of it. But I was thinking of that movie Black Bear from 2020 with Aubrey Plaza and what's his
Christopher Abbott.
shit. Yeah, there you go. And Christopher Abbott, and just that kind of surreal version of like, is the movie within the movie what's happening, or is the movie we're watching what's happening, and like
Hmm.
everything just kind of getting mixed together. And when you center a movie around creatives, I mean, the Stunt Man is another example of this. The New Nightmare is another example of this. When the movie is centered around something that's being made by creative people, you really kind of lose track of where things are at any given moment. And I think also with just to bring it back to that Adam Goldberg character yet again, um, you know these people just really not giving any kind of slack to their actors, and just making this horrible experience for them just to kind of coax something good out of them. We celebrate a lot of these filmmakers all the time, but at the
Hmm.
same time, not great.
No, definitely not. Does Adam Goldberg's character even get a name? I don't even think he does.
I don't think he
It's
did.
just the
I think it,
director. Yeah,
yeah,
just like a
yeah,
presence on set.
yeah,
Yeah, I haven't seen Black Bear, but it was on my list, and then 2020 things happened.
yeah, sure.
Never got around to it, but I definitely still need to check that out. Yeah, for sure.
Right on, right on. What do you got next?
Next, I guess continuing the theme of washed up actors who were supposed to be thinking about the fact that it's this actor. I was thinking about Birdman and Michael
Hmm.
Keaton sort of being haunted by his character is being haunted by a past role who is supposed to remind us of Michael Keaton being haunted by Batman.
Yeah.
So we spend that whole movie, and sort of it's a similar dynamic too, where he's trying to return to his former glory, and while also trying to rebuild his relationship with a daughter who resents him and the path of addiction that he went down, and in that movie she followed. Yeah, just really trying to throw himself into a role, even though it's tearing him apart psychologically speaking.
Yeah, absolutely. And that line starts blurring and blurring as
Right.
it goes on, and he
The
doesn't
play
know the
versus
people
real life
around him.
versus,
Yeah,
yeah, the character
exactly.
versus, yeah.
That's a good one to include here for sure. I will go with my last one. I was thinking about, action movies where the guy isn't actually an action hero. And the one I
Mm,
had to go with because he's an actor, I had to go with Tropic Thunder here.
nice.
My favorite thing about the exorcism is essentially that, once things, go to hell and, the possession is in full force and all that, we are essentially dealing with a fake priest going up against a fake demon. I mean, that is really what's happening here.
Yeah.
Russell Crowe is not a priest. And I think if the goal of Joshua John Miller, the writer director here, was to make us forget that, which I feel like that was the ultimate idea. By the end of this movie, to forget that this is an actor, just like with any good movie, the goal is for the actor to slip
Right.
in and you just completely forget, then I think he succeeded because by the end of this movie, it's just this priest played by Russell Crowe going up against this demon, and which, by the way, David Hyde Pierce has taken over at this point. I mean, who
Right.
doesn't love seeing David Hyde Pierce in anything? But
He's so perfect
y-
in this. Like,
he's great.
that's the look is just exactly what you need from that character.
Oh, he's so good. I love him. But yeah, at that point, I was in, and that's I think a big part of why this movie worked for me because at that point I had basically forgotten. Oh, wait a minute, Russell Crowe's playing an actor who's playing a priest. That had slipped away, and it was just this demonic possession thriller I was watching at that point.
I kind of had a different experience there where I was still thinking about that at the end, and I found it very satisfying because um there's that scene earlier where he's rehearsing the I was about to call it a spell, a ritual, like an exorcism ritual. Whoops. Where he's calling on all the archangels to come help him. He's rehearsing that with his daughter, and she tells him the truth of the line is when he believes it.
Sure.
So then by the end, when he is able to call forth all those words, he doesn't even need the Bible because it's burned up at that point.
Yeah.
He's able to call forth the line and he means it at the end. It's like not only is he exercising the demon, but he's finally slipped into the role in the way that he was supposed
Yeah.
to all along.
Absolutely. Absolutely. The character of Tony nailed it at that point, basically.
Exactly.
So
Yep.
yeah. Well, do you have any other pieces?
Yeah, I've got I guess I over prepared. I've got a couple just to run through quickly.
Sure. Sure.
I did want to mention The Final Girls, because Joshua John Miller and M.A. Fortin, who co-wrote this, also co-wrote The Final Girls. So that was a meta take on slasher films. A girl whose mother was a slasher actress sort of gets sucked into the world of one of her mom's movies. So
Hmm.
a similar like parent-child thing, a blurring of between what's the horror movie and what's my mom. Sort of using genre as a way to explore all these themes of loss and grief and just parent stuff. um,
Sure.
very good. I was trying to think what like horror subgenre I would like to see them take on next. Um, something supernatural, like a poltergeist thing, could be fun.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah. I could see that
Yeah.
being a lot of fun from these people.
I did want to mention a book, which I didn't actually really enjoy all that much, but it really made me think of this. It was just from a year or two ago, I think, called "Burn the Negative" by Josh Winning. It's
Mm.
about a cursed horror movie production. Furthermore, a cursed remake production that sort of reawakens a demon that had haunted a horror movie from the 80s, I think. So this woman was a child star in the original movie, and since then, most of the rest of the cast has met a mysterious end, like horrible tragic accidents over the years. So it's become this like cult favorite film where people know that this movie's cursed, and now they're trying to reboot it as like a prestige limited series. um,
Yeah.
but there are lots of actually similar set pieces in that book with this movie where they sort of build the house on a soundstage and sort of blurs the line between like, are we acting on a set or is this house really cursed the way that it's supposed to be within the movie?
Sure.
So I was thinking that the book itself, I mean, it's fine. There were just a lot of like everybody's last names are like Carpenter and England and Landis and like it all just felt a little too cute for me.
On the
But
nose. Yeah.
it's fun, fun enough, I guess. Um,
Right on, right on. You know, while you were talking about that, I was actually just thinking about Hereditary with the whole dollhouse aspect of it,
yeah,
with the house kind of, and I really like that. That's yet another thing, you know. Again, everybody's just trashing the Exorcism so much, but I really liked that look
that
into the way
looked
sets work. It looks
excellent.
great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, I guess the last thing I wanted to bring up then was the Amityville Horror. I
Hmm.
like another sort of father family thing going on. I like horror movies that are sort of about the potential for male violence. The
Mm.
Amityville Horror is like, is dad possessed? Is dad going crazy? Or sometimes do dads just kind of snap and kill their families? Unfortunately,
Yeah.
and so I was thinking about that here, where it's like, is he relapsing? Is it? Are we supposed to? How concerned are we supposed to be about the fact that he's drinking again? Like, does he present
Yeah.
that much of a danger to his daughter just because he's, going back to his old ways, or is there a demon here?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Absolutely. I mean, I
that's my
guess in
last
that
one.
case, you could bring the Shining in
True,
as well
absolutely.
too.
Yep.
So, but yeah, that is definitely weighing heavy over the whole relationship with the daughter, and really just this whole family aspect of the film. And so, yeah, I think that's a great little combination there to include on this list. So. I'll read down our list of puzzle pieces. We'll get into some closing thoughts here, but we talked about The Exorcist and The Exorcist Believer, New Nightmare, The Stunt Man, Absolution, Black Bear, Birdman, Tropic Thunder, The Final Girls, Burn the Negative, Hereditary, The Amityville Horror, and The Shining. Um, yeah, I love the Georgetown Project as the
Yeah.
title of the movie within the movie. I just think that's just so perfect. And
Mhm.
this is another thing I liked about the movie is you could tell that these are people who care about horror movies. Like
Yes.
this is something, and obviously the director has a lot of reason to care about horror movies with his pre-directing career
Yeah.
within the world of film. And I think that it just shows in this movie, even if it unfortunately got quite chopped up over the years.
Yeah. It was unfortunate. I thought a lot of the scare setups were fun. I liked a lot of the meta stuff that we didn't necessarily talk about too. Like Chloe Bailey, for example, is a real life both pop star and actress, like her character in this. I thought like
Mm.
when the daughter is sitting there scrolling through Instagram and she sees like the one picture has a whole bunch of comments. Like one of the comments is "Come to Brazil," which is something that online stans say to pop stars all the time. Like this
I'm
movie gets
sure.
it. I think even if it's a little messy. Like I straight up like do not understand who Sam Worthington was supposed to be in this movie. Like he's
That's
like the
true. We didn't
priest
mention him.
sidekick, but then gets the role of the main priest for a scene. Like that means you have to reshoot everything rather than just the solo other priest. Like I don't know what was happening there. It's got like 3 minutes of screen time. Like clearly something was lost. But I don't mind that kind of thing. It makes me think about the process of filmmaking, which I think fits
Yeah.
with this movie. It makes me wonder about like studio notes and about the cuts and shooting problems and reshoots and all that. So even if I'm not necessarily watching the movie for a piece of work on its own, I'm thinking about all these other things. And when something can, stick in my mind like that and make me wonder and want to read more, I'm happy. I don't know.
I have to imagine at some point during the production, one of the studio notes was, "Can we make this more like The Exorcist?"
For sure.
And that must have hurt, but
Yeah, right.
but yeah, that's a good place to wrap this one up. Eric, is there another movie you watched recently you'd like to recommend to our listeners?
Yeah, so last night I went to the premiere of Horizon, an American Saga, Chapter 1, which is
Nice.
Kevin Costner's new Western epic project. So Chapter 1's out in June, Chapter 2's in August. He apparently ran out of money while filming Part 3, and Part 4 is stuck in pre-production. So
Mm,
I have no idea what the plan is here. Like, it's tracking horribly. It's likely gonna bomb this weekend. But I really liked it. I thought there was a lot of, he's a good director. He understands
yeah.
visuals. He loves a sweeping score. Like this is full of like shamelessly like melodramatic romance. There's so much violence. There's a ton of characters and storylines, and pretty much for the record, nothing gets wrapped up by the end. So we're just sort of left hanging.
Yeah, I'm
But
sure.
I was left hanging in a way that, like, I would watch part 2 today happily, even though part 1 was 3 hours long. I felt like it raced by. Like, it's so, like, place hopping. There's Montana and Wyoming and the gorgeous forests and the mountains and the desert, and just always something visually to look at, some new, like, the cast is absolutely stacked. Some new performance. Everybody seems like, some people seem like they're having fun. Some people are like super, super committed. There's just so much going on. I was like happily overwhelmed by the spectacle of it all. So success aside, I don't think this is going to wind up being an awards player or anything. But I think it's a good 3 hours at the movies. All those outside conversations, I think, leaving those aside, it's a good 3 hours at the movies.
Right on. Yeah, I do want to see it. I like a good big swing.
Yeah.
It's a lot of commitment. I will say, last night I went to see The Bike Riders, and they showed the latest trailer for Horizon,
Mhm.
and I love when Costner, he punches this guy, and the crunch of that
Mhm.
sound design.
The
It's
sound
like,
design
oh,
is fantastic in this. There's a bit
this
where a woman
guy.
like hits somebody with an umbrella, and the like crunch of the umbrella over this guy's head. I was like, yes, perfect.
That's movie making right there. I
Yep.
love it. I love it. Right on. Eric, tell people where they can find you and your writing and everything you're up to.
Yeah, I am a critic who's online at, unfortunately, still on Twitter at Mr. E. Anders. And then my Medium publication is everythingsinteresting.press.
Right on. Well, Eric, thank you so much for coming back to the show so soon.
Yeah,
I'm
anytime.
really happy to have you here. Hopefully we'll get you back again sometime.
Sounds good. Thanks.
All right, so I hope you enjoyed that conversation about The Exorcism. Thank you so much to Eric Langberg for joining me, and thank you to all of you for listening. By the way, Eric actually messaged me after we finished recording this to ask if we ever mentioned that the director's father played Father Karras in the original Exorcist, and I don't think we did mention that, although it was definitely on my mind when we were talking about that this, filmmaker obviously has connection to, exorcism movies. So that was part of the conversation. But yeah, I just wanted to kind of shout that out for a second. If you came into this conversation thinking to yourself, are they going to talk about the Pope's Exorcist a whole bunch? You can go back and listen to my full episode from last year on the Pope's Exorcist. Also a good movie. I liked both of these movies for very, very different reasons. Again, they're totally different movies. They just happen to have Russell Crowe starring as an exorcist, or as we discussed in the conversation, not as an exorcist, as an actor playing an exorcist. Anyway, watch both movies. Listen to both episodes. While you're at it, subscribe to the podcast. You can find it wherever you listen to podcasts. And if you're enjoying piecing it together, make sure to drop us a little 5-star rating and review while you're at it. It is very helpful for making sure that more people check out the show. And we have had a lot of new listeners lately, and I do really, really appreciate that. So if you're out there and you're new, get in touch. I love hearing from listeners. If you have any puzzle pieces that we didn't bring up on the conversation that you think should have been brought up, hit me up. I'd love to hear about them. Maybe we'll get you on an episode sometime. You could also join our Facebook group, Popcorn and Puzzle Pieces, to continue the conversation. And, of course, follow us on social media at PiecingPod. Let's close this out with a piece of music like I always do. The first and third Friday of every month of this year, available on all the streaming services. And I'm going to go with a track called Shadow Self. That also feels like it would be a good fit for this movie and the issues that Russell Crowe's character is going through. And yeah, let's go with Shadow Self. That'll fit really well, I think. So this is from the 24 for 2024 series. Make sure to follow the Spotify playlist, also Apple Music, and we will be back with more Piecing It Together real soon.
an All Points West production, produced by David Rosen in Las Vegas.